You don't even come close to my mother-in-law." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut, and for a moment I couldn't even respond. My daughter, my sweet, innocent little girl, was staring at me with those big, judgmental eyes, her voice trembling but firm, and I felt a strange mix of hurt and disbelief. I pushed my chair back, the wooden legs scraping harshly against the floor, and leaned back, trying to collect my thoughts, but inside I was shaking. How could she say something so cruel? How could she even think it? I mean, I've done everything I could to be a good mother, a good wife, a good grandmother, yet here I was being judged not by my husband, not by my peers, but by my own child, and it cut deeper than I could have imagined. I wanted to shout, to defend myself, to tell her that love isn't about comparison, but about care, but the words wouldn't come out. I just sat there, the room suddenly feeling unbearably small, the walls closing in on me, and I could see the disappointment in her eyes like a physical weight pressing down. I still remember the way her little fingers clenched around the edge of the table, as if she were bracing herself for a fight, and I wondered, was this really happening? Was my daughter really putting her mother-in-law above me, as if my years of sacrifices, my sleepless nights, and every tiny effort I made for this family meant nothing? It all started a few months ago, when my daughter Lily turned 10. She was at that age where everything felt heightened. Every word, every glance, every gesture carried a weight that could either build bridges or tear them down. She had always been a loving, affectionate child, but lately I noticed a subtle change in her attitude. She started comparing everyone to someone else, her friends to her classmates, me to her teachers, and then, shockingly, her comments began centering around family. And I knew that somewhere along the way, her relationship with my mother-in-law, Margaret, had grown into something special. Margaret had always been a charming woman, elegant, kind, and soft-spoken, and Lily, being naturally drawn to warmth and indulgence, gravitated towards her like a moth to a flame. I didn't mind it at first. After all, every child needs someone to dote on them, and Margaret, with her calm demeanor and endless patience, was perfect for that role. But slowly, her presence began to overshadow mine in Lily's eyes, and I started noticing subtle remarks that stabbed at my self-esteem. Comments like, "Grandma makes the best cookies," or "Mom, you're okay, but Grandma's stories are way better," seemed harmless at first, but over time they accumulated like small cuts that eventually left me bleeding inside. I brushed them off, thinking it was a phase, but the underlying tension was growing, and I knew I couldn't ignore it forever. The day it all blew up started innocently enough. It was a Sunday morning, and the family was gathered around the breakfast table, sunlight streaming in through the kitchen window. I had made pancakes, Lily's favorite, with fresh strawberries and whipped cream, carefully arranging them in a fun shape that I knew she would love. Margaret had come over, as she usually did on Sundays, and was sitting across from us, smiling gently at Lily, her eyes twinkling with that soft grandmotherly affection. I watched them interact, my heart both warm and uneasy. I tried to engage Lily in conversation, asking about her school projects and her latest drawing, but she seemed distracted, her attention more on Margaret than on me, and then the words came, quietly at first, but enough for me to catch them. "You don't even come close to my mother-in-law," Lily said, staring right at me. I froze mid-bite, the syrup dripping from my fork, my hand trembling. It was as if the air had turned into ice, freezing everything in place. I looked at Margaret, who, to my surprise, didn't react at all. She just gave me a small, apologetic smile, and my heart sank further. I tried to respond calmly, though inside I felt like screaming. "Lily, that's not fair," I said, keeping my voice steady even as it cracked slightly. "Why would you say something like that?" But Lily, stubborn as ever, crossed her arms and refused to budge. "It's true, Mom. Grandma is just better at everything. She's nicer, she listens, she's always happy, and you're just Mom." That last part landed like a hammer. Just Mom, not a loving mother, not someone who sacrifices her time and energy for her child, just Mom. The weight of it was crushing. I tried to hold back tears to maintain some semblance of composure, but the hurt was raw. Unrelenting, I could feel my face flush with a mix of anger and humiliation, and I wanted to pick her up, shake her gently, and make her see reason, but instead, I just pushed my chair back, letting it scrape against the floor, and leaned back, letting out a long, shaky breath. The tension at the table was palpable. Margaret tried to interject softly, "Lily, maybe we should." But I cut her off before she could finish. "No, Margaret, don't. Let's not make this about you." My voice was steadier than I felt, but my heart was pounding in my chest. I looked at Lily, who was now avoiding my gaze, and I realized that this wasn't just a passing comment or a childish insult. This was a declaration, a sign of where her loyalties lay, and it hurt more than I could put into words. I wanted to ask my husband for support, to have him back me up in front of Lily, but he was sitting quietly, trying not to take sides, and I felt the sting of isolation deepen. The day before, nothing had hinted at this explosion. Lily and I had spent the afternoon baking cookies together, laughing and making a mess in the kitchen. We had been close, sharing little secrets, trading stories about school, and talking about her dreams. And yet, somehow, overnight, the dynamic had shifted, and I was suddenly the outsider in my own home. The thought gnawed at me all day, a persistent, sour ache that refused to leave. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction, every word, trying to pinpoint where I had gone wrong. Had I been too strict, too busy with work? Had I unknowingly pushed her toward Margaret? The questions circled endlessly in my mind, and no answer could make the hurt disappear. In the following days, I tried everything to repair the damage. I spent extra time with Lily, took her on little outings, listened to her school stories with exaggerated enthusiasm, tried to make her see that I loved her just as much as Margaret did, if not more. But every time I tried to connect, she would bring up Margaret, comparing me unfavorably, and I felt myself retreating emotionally. I started questioning my role in her life, my place in her heart, and even my worth as a mother. It was a downward spiral, and the more I tried to fix things, the more entangled I became in this web of guilt, resentment, and confusion. One afternoon, after a particularly tense breakfast where Lily had refused to eat my pancakes, I found myself standing in the kitchen, staring at the pile of dishes in the sink, tears streaming down my face. My husband walked in, noticed my state, and asked what was wrong. I tried to explain, but the words came out fragmented, broken, and emotional. "It's Lily. She doesn't value me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She says I'm nothing compared to Margaret." My husband's face softened, and he pulled me into a hug, whispering reassurances, telling me it wasn't my fault, that children go through phases, that Lily still loved me. But even his comforting words couldn't erase the sting. Deep down, I knew this wasn't a phase. This was something bigger, something that had been simmering for months, and I needed to confront it head on. That's when I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I sat Lily down, took her hands in mine, and looked into her eyes, trying to reach the little girl who had once looked up to me with unwavering trust. "Lily," I said gently, "I know you love Grandma, and that's wonderful, but you have to understand something. Your love for her doesn't mean I love you any less. I've always been here for you, every day, in every way, and I've done my best because I love you more than anything in this world." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of defiance and confusion. "But Mom, you're not like Grandma. She's perfect." Those words cut deeper than any knife. Perfect, and I realized in that moment that I was no longer just fighting for my role in her life. I was fighting for her perception of love, for her understanding of family, and in a way for my own self-respect. So I made a choice. I wouldn't give up. I wouldn't let my daughter believe that love could be measured, compared, or ranked. I started planning ways to show her, not through words, but through actions, that my love was irreplaceable, that my care, my presence, my sacrifices mattered in ways that even Margaret couldn't replicate. It wasn't going to be easy. Every step forward seemed to be met with resistance, every small victory overshadowed by another comparison. I had to be patient, strategic, and resilient, and at the same time, I had to protect myself from the constant emotional bruising. And then, just when I thought I was starting to make progress, something happened that threw everything into chaos. Lily, in her innocence, or perhaps in her growing cunning, said something that I will never forget, a statement that challenged not only my relationship with her, but my very understanding of our family dynamic. She looked at me, her eyes steady and unwavering, and said, "Mom, you'll never understand because you're not Grandma." That sentence echoed in my mind for days. It wasn't just a comparison anymore. It was a verdict. And suddenly, I knew that if I wanted to reclaim my place in my daughter's heart, if I wanted her to truly see me as more than just Mom, I was going to have to do something bold, something daring, something that would make her stop and realize that love isn't about who bakes the best cookies or tells the most enchanting stories. It's about consistency, sacrifice, and unwavering presence, and I was ready to prove it, no matter the cost. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Could you face your child's harsh words and still find a way to win their heart? Would you fight for your place or step back and let someone else fill it? Think carefully, because what I did next changed everything. And it wasn't simple, it wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't what anyone expected. After I sat Lily down and heard her say those words, I knew I couldn't just sit back and wait for things to change. I had to act, but carefully. I couldn't yell, I couldn't bribe, and I certainly couldn't force her to see me the way I wanted. I had to make her feel my presence, my love, in a way that went beyond words. So I started small. I began by paying attention to the little things, her favorite snacks, the book she liked, the shows she wanted to watch. I made a point of being present in her daily life, not as a nagging mom, but as a partner in her world. I learned the names of her favorite characters in her shows, remembered the details of her school projects, and even started joining her in little games that I would normally have dismissed as childish. At first, she barely noticed, or if she did, she gave me a look that said, "Nice try, Mom." But I didn't let that discourage me. I knew that love sometimes needs to be patient, quiet, almost invisible before it leaves a mark. Then came the breakthrough moment. It wasn't dramatic, and there was no grand announcement, but it changed everything. One rainy afternoon, Lily came running in from school, drenched, carrying a torn backpack and a heap of soggy papers. Normally, she would have run straight to Margaret, who lived nearby and often spoiled her after school, but this time she ran to me. "Mom, can you help me?" she asked, shivering, tears mixing with raindrops on her cheeks, and in that moment something shifted. She didn't say, "Grandma would know what to do," or "I wish Grandma was here." She said, "Mom, you." I wrapped her in a warm towel, pulled her into the kitchen, and listened as she explained how a group of kids at school had mocked her project, how her ideas were being dismissed, and how she felt like no one understood her. I could see the hurt in her eyes, the vulnerability, and for the first time in weeks, I realized that she needed me, not anyone else, to make her feel safe, to make her feel important, to make her feel loved. I helped her organize her project. We fixed the papers together, and I even stayed up with her late into the evening, guiding her through finishing touches, laughing at little jokes and sharing stories of my own childhood struggles. By the time we were done, she looked at me with a mixture of awe and gratitude that melted my heart. That night, as I tucked her into bed, she whispered softly, "Thanks, Mom." Really amazing. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, I continued to build that bridge. I invited her to cook with me. We had movie nights where she picked the films, and I listened, not just hearing her words, but really listening. Slowly, I could see her perception of me begin to shift. She no longer compared me to Margaret in the same cutting way, and there were moments when she would look at me, her eyes full of trust and admiration, and I could feel my role in her life solidifying again. But as much as this progress warmed my heart, I knew the real test was yet to come, the moment when she would have to publicly acknowledge that I was just as important in her life as anyone else. That opportunity came sooner than I expected. It was Lily's birthday, and Margaret, of course, had prepared a lavish celebration at her own house. When I heard about it, I felt a pang of anxiety. I wanted Lily to have a wonderful day, but I didn't want to be overshadowed again. I wanted her to see that I could create magic in her life, that I could be the mother who makes memories that linger far longer than any cookie or story. So I planned my own little surprise, a picnic in the park, complete with homemade treats, balloons, and a scavenger hunt designed just for her. It wasn't extravagant, but it was personal, thoughtful, and entirely from the heart. The day of the birthday came, and Lily was torn. She wanted to go to Margaret's party, but she also wanted to see what I had planned. I could sense her internal conflict, the pull between indulgence and love. Finally, after some coaxing, she agreed to come with me first, promising she would visit Margaret later. And as we walked to the park, I felt a flutter of hope mixed with nerves. What if she rejected it? What if she said it wasn't good enough? But the moment we arrived, everything changed. The park was quiet, the sun breaking through the clouds in a soft golden light. I had laid out the picnic blanket, arranged the balloons, and set up the scavenger hunt clues. When Lily saw it, her eyes widened, and for a moment she was speechless. Then a smile broke across her face, a real, unguarded smile, and she ran toward me, throwing her arms around me. "Mom, you did all this," she exclaimed. "This is amazing." We spent the day laughing, running from clue to clue, discovering little surprises I had hidden along the way. I could see her happiness radiating, the way her cheeks glowed, the way her eyes sparkled. And in that moment, I realized that this was more than just a birthday celebration. This was a turning point. She was beginning to understand that love isn't about who gives the grandest gift or bakes the fanciest cake. It's about effort, thoughtfulness, and presence. She was beginning to see me, truly see me, in a way she hadn't for months. Later that evening, as we drove home, she leaned her head against my shoulder and said softly, "Mom, I think I understand now. You're amazing, just you." My heart swelled, tears pricking my eyes. That simple acknowledgement, coming from the mouth of the child who had once told me I could never compare to her grandmother, felt like a victory beyond anything I could have imagined. I didn't need a grand gesture or public recognition. Just this. This quiet, honest validation was enough to heal the wounds that had been forming for months. Of course, the journey wasn't entirely smooth after that. There were moments of regression, moments when Lily would slip back into comparisons, moments when I would feel the sting of insecurity creep in again, but each time I reminded myself of that day in the park, of the way her eyes had lit up, of the way she had chosen to spend her time with me, despite every other option. I realized that love is not a one-time proof but a continuous effort, a series of choices we make every day to show the people we care about that they matter. And Margaret, for her part, handled it with grace. She never tried to compete or diminish my role. Instead, she subtly supported my efforts, praising Lily for helping me, complimenting the thoughtful touches I had added, and stepping back when it became clear that Lily was choosing to connect with me. It was a delicate balance, but over time, I noticed a shift in family dynamics. Lily no longer spoke of her grandmother as the ultimate standard of love and affection. She began to speak of me as someone irreplaceable, someone she could rely on, someone whose presence was just as vital in her life as anyone else's. The day finally came when I felt I had fully regained my place in her heart. It was another ordinary afternoon, nothing special on the calendar, just the two of us sitting in the living room, talking and laughing as we shared a snack. Lily looked up at me, her face serious for a moment, and said, "Mom, I want you to know something. I don't ever want to take you for granted. You're my mom, and that's the best thing in the world. No one else could ever compare." My chest tightened with emotion, and I felt tears blur my vision. After everything, the comparisons, the hurt, the doubt, I had reached this moment. My daughter, the one who had once made me feel invisible, was now telling me that I was seen, valued, and loved in a way that was uniquely mine. Looking back now, I realized that this experience taught me more about patience, resilience, and the complexities of love than I ever could have imagined. It showed me that even when someone we care about seems to reject us, there is always a path to understanding, connection, and reconciliation if we are willing to put in the effort and approach the situation with empathy, creativity, and steadfastness. I also learned that children are perceptive in ways we sometimes underestimate. They notice effort, they recognize care, and they respond to authenticity. By being present, thoughtful, and emotionally available, we can earn their trust and affection in ways that endure beyond any fleeting comparison or moment of doubt. So, if you ever find yourself in a situation where your love feels overshadowed or your efforts go unrecognized, remember this: persistence, patience, and presence can work wonders. Small, thoughtful actions, consistent attention, and genuine care often leave the deepest impact, even when it seems like they won't. And when you finally see that acknowledgement in the eyes of the person you love, the subtle shift, the unguarded smile, the heartfelt words, you'll realize that every ounce of effort was worth it. If you were on my side during this whole journey, if you felt the frustration, the hurt, and then the joy as I slowly reclaimed my place in my daughter's heart, then, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more stories like this. Comment below with your thoughts. Have you ever had to fight for your place in someone's life, or been compared in a way that hurt? I want to hear your stories, your experiences, and your advice. Life is messy, love is complicated, but in the end, effort and care can change everything. I'll see you all in the next story.